I paid for my daughter's wedding and she used it to mock my life in front of 200 guests. I just smiled. Then the groom's boss almost choked when he heard my name and asked for the microphone. What he said made her cry. You know that moment when your own daughter stands up at her wedding reception and decides to roast you in front of 200 guests? Well, that happened to me. But what happened next? Let's just say the room went from laughing at me to complete silence in about 30 seconds. Picture this beautiful wedding venue, crystal chandeliers. Everyone dressed to the nines. My daughter, Rachel, looked absolutely stunning in her white gown, and I was so proud watching her marry the love of her life. The reception was going perfectly until she grabbed the microphone for what I thought would be a sweet thank you speech. Instead, she smiled at the crowd and said, I want to talk about my mom for a minute. She's going through what I guess you'd call a late life crisis. The room chuckled at 60. She decided she wants to build an empire. She actually used finger quotes, and the laughter got louder. We keep telling her she should act her age, but she won't listen. I sat there smiling, dying inside as 200 people laughed at my so-called midlife crisis. But here's what none of them knew, including my own daughter. While they were all mocking the crazy old lady trying to play entrepreneur, the most powerful person in that room was sitting quietly at table 6, because you see what happened next involved Rachel's new husband's boss standing up, nearly choking on his champagne, while looking at me in shock and saying 5 words that changed everything but to understand how my daughter's wedding turned into the most satisfying moment of vindication in my entire life. I need to take you back 2 years to when this whole thing started. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Never Too Old channel. We're creating a community of incredible people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. 2 years earlier, I was Diana Thompson, 60 years old, recently divorced, and honestly feeling pretty lost after 30 years working as an office manager. I'd been laid off when the company restructured, which, let's be honest, usually means they replaced older employees with younger, cheaper ones. For the first time in decades, I was truly on my own. Rachel was 32 and living with her fiancé, Jake. My ex-husband had remarried someone 15 years younger, because apparently that's what men do during their actual midlife crises, and there I was sitting in my small apartment wondering what the heck I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. But here's the thing about being 60 and suddenly unemployed: you have 2 choices. You can either accept that your best years are behind you, or you can decide that all those years of experience might actually be worth something. I chose option 2. I started a consulting business helping small companies with their operations and efficiency. Nothing glamorous, just using the skills I developed over 3 decades of keeping offices running smoothly. I called it DT Enterprises, simple, professional, and it kept my personal name out of it. The problem was, nobody in my family took it seriously. Rachel would roll her eyes whenever I mentioned a new client. Mom, you're 60, not 23, maybe it's time to act your age. She'd say Jake was even worse, constantly trying to mansplain basic business concepts to me, like I was a child playing dress up. Have you considered finding a normal job instead of this entrepreneur phase? My sister would ask during family dinners. Diana, you missed your chance. Just accept it and find something stable. Even my friends meant well, but their comments stung. It's cute that you're trying, they'd say, but realistically, how much can you really accomplish starting over at your age? The worst part was that I was actually good at what I was doing, really good. My clients were thriving, my contracts were growing, and I was making more money than I ever had as an office manager, but every time I tried to share a success with my family, they'd pat me on the head like I was a toddler who'd managed to tie her shoes. Rachel was planning her wedding during this time, and she made it very clear that she didn't want me talking about my little business to Jake's colleagues who would be attending. Please don't embarrass me by telling people you're an entrepreneur. She said, just say you're between jobs or something. I agreed because I loved my daughter and wanted her wedding day to be perfect, but sitting there listening to her friends make jokes about my midlife crisis while I quietly paid for half the wedding expenses they didn't even know about. I started to realize something: my family wasn't just unsupportive. They were actively ashamed of me for refusing to fade quietly into middle-aged invisibility, and that hurt more than any layoff ever could. Good. The wedding day arrived, and it was absolutely beautiful. Rachel had chosen this gorgeous venue with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden. I'd helped pay for quite a bit of it, actually, though she just assumed the money came from my divorce settlement rather than my thriving business. I dressed carefully that morning, nice, but not too flashy, elegant, but not attention-grabbing. The last thing I wanted was to upstage the bride on her special day. Rachel had specifically asked me not to mention my consulting work to Jake's colleagues who would be attending, and I promised to keep quiet about my success. Just blend in, Mom, she'd said during the rehearsal dinner. Jake's boss, Mr. Anderson, will be there with his wife, plus a bunch of people from his tech company. These are serious business people, so please don't go on about your little projects. I bit my tongue and nodded. Little projects, right? The ceremony was perfect. Rachel looked like a princess. Jake seemed genuinely happy, and I cried happy tears watching my daughter start this new chapter. During the cocktail hour, I mingled quietly, making small talk with other family members and staying well away from Jake's work crowd. But I couldn't help overhearing some of their conversations. These tech company people were discussing business deals, market strategies, recent acquisitions in their industry. I knew more about their sector than they probably realized, but I kept my mouth shut and smiled politely when introduced as the bride's mother. Then came dinner, and everything was going smoothly until Rachel's maid of honor decided to give a speech. She started sweet, talking about their friendship and how beautiful the wedding was, but then she shifted gears. "Now I have to talk about the bride's family," she said, with a grin, especially Rachel's mom, who's been quite the character lately. The room chuckled, and I felt my stomach drop.